before the maximum height of
Very
20
simple.
meters. The other thing you can do is you can find the speed here. If you want to find the speed there, you put the equation v squared equals v0 squared plus 2 times minus g. 1 more minus y0, minus y is 0, initial y is minus is 15. You solve that equation, then you find the final velocity. So time is not involved, you can do that. I want to direct those last results in another way, then I will stop, and that's pretty interesting because it tells you the use and abuse of calculus. I'm going to find for you this result using calculus in a different way. So from the calculus we know d dt is equal to a. So multiply both sides by d. Now you have to know from elementary calculus that d times d dt is really d by dt of v squared over 2. Now I hope you guys know that by calculus we're going to take a derivative of the function of a function, namely v squared over 2 is a function of t, and v itself is a function of t. And the rule for taking the derivative is first take the v derivative of this object, then take the d by dt of t, this one. On the right hand side, I'm going to write this a dx dt. Just not this standard. Here's what I'm going to do something which some of you are told never ever to do, which is to just cancel the dt's. You all know that when you do dy dx, you're not supposed to cancel that d. That's actually correct. You don't cancel the d and the derivative. But this happens to be completely legitimate. So I'm going to assume it's true and I'll maybe take the technical advice with it. What this really means is, in a given time delta t, to change this quantity, to change that to change this one. Therefore, you can multiply both sides by the delta t, but the only thing you should understand is delta t, as long as it's small and finite, will lead to some small and finite errors in the formula. Because the formula is really the limit in which delta x and delta t both go to 0. So what you have to do is multiply both sides by delta t. But remember, this property in the end may vanish in this form. So if you understand that, we can do this cancellation in this case on the left-hand side. The change in the quantity v squared over 2 is the change times the change of the quantity x. So add up all the changes on what you mean by integral. Same thing, add up all the changes. The change of v squared over 2 would be the final v squared over 2 minus the initial v squared over 2. And the other side would be j times the change in x. X minus x naught. And that's the formula I wrote for you. V squared is v0 squared plus 2a. X minus x naught. So the point is whenever you have derivatives with something over dt, do not hesitate to cancel the dt's and think of them as delta v squared over 2 equal to a times delta of x. This will be actually true as long as both quantities are vanishingly small. It will become more and more true. Delta x and delta v squared become vanishingly small in the limit here, approaching 0, the 2 will be not equal. If delta x is a finite amount in 1 second, this will not be true, because in the starting equation, delta x and delta t and delta v squared are all the same. So don't hesitate to manipulation of this sign, and I will do them quite often. You gotta understand when it's okay and when it's not okay. What this means is, in a time delta t, this quantity changes to some amount. At the same time delta t, that quantity changes to some amount. Then keeping delta t equals some number, you need greater changes to two quantities. Provided this is understood, the delta v squared over 2 is a change in v squared over 2. At the same time, there's a particle movement distance delta x. Then by adding the differences, we eliminate time and we get this final result. Alright, so if you go to your website today, you'll find that aside some problems, and you should try to do them today up to this chapter. Then next week, we'll do more complicated problems, then more motion in higher dimensions, or 2 dimensions or 3 dimensions. I'm not going to be very often. I always ask the question, Shelley is the name that I respond to. I will eventually respond to Professor Kagan, but the synapses take a bit longer, but that's not the name I immediately recognize. I have found that over the years, fewer and fewer students feel comfortable calling me Shelley. When I was young, it seemed to work. Now I'm gray and august. But Shelley, feel comfortable with it. It's a name that I prefer to be called by. Now, this is a class on death, but it's a philosophy class, and what that means is that the set of topics that we're going to be talking about in this class are not identical to the topics that other classes on death might try to cover. So the first thing I want to do is say something about things we won't be talking about that you might reasonably expect or hope that a class on death would talk about, so that if this is not the class you were looking for, you still have time to go check out some other class. So here's something that a class on death could cover that we won't talk about. And what I primarily have in mind are sort of psychological and sociological questions about the nature of death and the phenomenon of death. So a class on death might well have a discussion of the process of dying and coming to reconcile yourself with the fact that you're going to die. Some of you may know about Rick Ross's discussion of the so-called 5 stages of dying. There's denial, and then there's anger, and then there's bargaining. I actually remember the 5 stages. We're not going to talk about that. Similarly, we're not going to talk about the funeral industry in America and how it rips off people in their moments of grief and weakness and overcharges them for the various things that happen. We're not going to talk about that. We're not going to talk about the process of grief grieving or bereavement. We're not going to talk about sociological attitudes that we have towards the dying in our culture and how we tend to try to keep the dying hidden from the rest of us. These are all perfectly important topics, but they're not, as I say, topics that we're going to be talking about in this class. So what will we talk about? Well, the things we'll talk about are philosophical questions that arise as we begin to think about the nature of death. Like this. In broad scope, half the class is going to be, the first half of the class is going to be metaphysics, for those of you who are familiar with the philosophical piece of jargon, and roughly half the class, the second half of the class is going to be value theory. So the first half of the class is going to be concerned with questions about the nature of death. What happens when we die? Indeed, to get at that question, the first thing we're going to have to think about is, what are we? What kind of an entity is a person? In particular, do we have souls? And for this class, when I talk about a soul, what I'm going to mean is, for the philosophical jargon, I'm going to mean something immaterial, something distinct from our bodies. Do we have immaterial souls, something that might survive the death of our body? And if not, what does that imply about the nature of death? What kind of an event is death? What is it for me to survive? What would it mean for me to survive my death? What would it mean for me to survive tonight? That is, somebody's going to be here lecturing to the class on Thursday. Presumably that will be me. What is it for that person who's there on Thursday to be the same person as the person who's sitting there lecturing to you today? These are questions about the nature of personal identity. Pretty clearly, to think about death and continued existence and survival, we have to get clear about the nature of personal identity. These sorts of questions will occupy us for roughly the first half of the semester. And then we'll turn to value questions. Is the end, is death bad? Now, of course, most of us are usually strongly inclined to think that death is bad. There are a set of philosophical puzzles about how death could be bad. Just to give you a quick taste. If after my death I won't exist, how could anything be bad for me? How could anything be bad for something that doesn't exist? So how could death be bad? So it's not that the result of the fight that death isn't bad. It actually look to pin down precisely what is it about death that's bad and how can it be bad? Is there more than one thing about death that makes it bad? We'll turn to questions like that. If death is bad, then we might wonder, will immortality be a good thing? That's a question that we'll think about. Or more generally, we'll worry about how should the fact that I'm going to die affect the way I live? What should my attitude be towards my mortality? Should I be afraid of death, for example? Should I despair at the fact that I'm going to die? Finally, we'll turn to questions about suicide. Many of us think that given the valuable and precious thing that life is, suicide makes no sense. You're throwing away the only life you're ever going to have. And so we'll end the semester by thinking about questions along the lines of the rationality and morality of suicide. So roughly speaking, that's where we're going. First half of the class, metaphysics. Second half of the class, value theory. Next thing I need to explain is this. There's, roughly speaking, two ways to do a class, especially an introductory class like this. In approach number one, you simply lay out the various positions, pro and con, and the professor strives to remain neutral, to not tip his hand about what he holds. That's approach number one. Sometimes in my intro classes, that's the approach that I take. But the other approach, and the one that I should warn you, I'm going to take this semester, and this class is rather different. There's a line that I'm going to be developing, pushing, if you will, or defending in this class. That is to say, there's a certain set of views I hold about the issues that we'll be discussing, and what I'm going to try to do in this class is argue for those views, try to convince you that those views are correct. To have you know ahead of time quickly what those views are, I want to start by describing a set of views that many of you probably believe. So I'm going to give you a cluster of views. Logically speaking, you can believe some of these things and not all of them. But here's a set of views that many of you probably believe, and I imagine most of you believe at least some of these things. So here's a set of common views. First of all, that we have a soul. That is to say, we are not just bodies. We're not just lumps of bone and flesh. But there's a part of us, perhaps the essential part of us, that is something more than the physical, the spiritual, immaterial part of us, which I say in this class we'll call a soul. So most of you probably believe in souls. At least most people in America believe in some sort of immaterial soul. And given the existence of this immaterial soul, it's a possibility, indeed, a fair likelihood that we will survive our death. The death will be the destruction of my body, but my soul is immaterial, and so my soul can continue to exist after my death. And whether or not you actually believe in a soul, you hope that there's a soul, so that there'll be this serious possibility of surviving your death. Because death is not only bad, but so horrible that what we would like to have happen is we would like to live forever. And so armed with a soul, as it were, with at least the possibility of immortality. Immortality would be wonderful. That's what we hope is the case, whether or not we know that it's the case. Immortality would be wonderful. That's why death so bad. It robs us of immortality. And if there is no soul, if death is the end, if there is no immortality, if there is no immortality, this is such an overwhelmingly bad thing that the only obvious reaction, the natural reaction, the universal reaction, is to face the prospect of death with fear and despair. And as I mentioned earlier, then death is so horrible and life is so wonderful that it doesn't ever make sense to throw it away. And so suicide is both immoral on the one hand and never makes sense. It's always irrational as well, in addition. So that's a common set of views about the nature of death. And what I'm going to be doing, what I'm going to be arguing in this class is that set of views is pretty much mistaken from beginning to end. And so I'm going to try to convince you that there is no soul, immortality would not be a good thing, fear of death isn't actually an appropriate response to death, suicide under certain circumstances might be rationally morally justified. And the common picture is pretty much mistaken from start to end. That's at least my goal. That's my aim. That's what I'm going to be doing. Now, to the point I believe the views I believe in, I hope at the end of the semester you'll agree with me, because I think they're true. I hope you'll end up believing the truth. But I should say that the crucial point isn't for you to agree with me. The crucial point is for you to think for yourself. And so what I'm really doing is inviting you to take a good, cold, hard look at death, and to face it and think about it in a way that most of us don't do. If you, at the end of the semester, haven't agreed with me about this particular claim or that particular claim, so be it. I'll be content, I won't be completely content, but I'll be largely content as long as you really thought through the arguments on each side of these various issues. So I'm going to take a second pass around the shoulders. Right. Next introductory remark. Well, today's talk is going to be devoted to business. I'll get to, as time permits, some philosophy at the end. While making one more remark about what I'll be doing in terms of this class, this is a philosophy class. We'll basically be sitting here thinking about what we can know or make sense of with regard to death using our reasoning capacity. We'll be trying to think about death
standpoint. One kind of evidence or one kind of argument that we won't be